Hello and welcome to this special broadcast organized on the sidelines of the Atlantic Dialogues Conference, organized by the Policy Center for the New South. I am today delighted to be joined by Professor Michaël Tanchum, who is a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C. And we're going to talk about the energy transition in the Atlantic Basin, who pays, who wins, and who loses. Professor, thank you very much for accepting the invitation.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to talk with you about energy transition and the geopolitical realignments in the Atlantic Basin, and how are the energy transition in North Africa and Europe reshaping the geopolitical dynamics in the Atlantic Basin, and what strategies, opportunities, and challenges do these shifts present for regional cooperation in energy security?
Thank you for asking me this question. We were at an extremely pivotal time. It's kind of make or break for the world, and I want to give you one statistic that will illustrate this. The global oil demand from 1980 to today has doubled. And the reason it doubled is because all these countries first made it to middle-income countries, starting with countries like Japan and Korea, and then more advanced, and then China, and then the Latin American countries, North African countries. All of these countries have made it to middle income and are trying to go beyond, and new countries in Africa and elsewhere are trying to reach middle income status, all based on the energy. Now, if these countries want to keep their status or go further, we're going to need even more energy, and it's going to have to be something besides oil. Natural gas and oil have an important role to play, but they're not the long-term future. They're very important for the short term, especially for Africa. So what Morocco is trying to do with natural gas between Nigeria and Morocco, including the West African countries, is important. But what is the future will be renewable energy. And again, this is where we see Morocco leading. As you know, the X-Links project is going to supply 8% of the UK's power. But Morocco has enough renewable energy for its own development and then to transport to Europe. So in the form of green ammonia, Morocco is going to be one of the leading exporters of green ammonia. But beyond that, Morocco already is a important producer of agricultural products. Europe depends on fruits and vegetables from Morocco, and industrial products, automobiles. The two most popular best-selling models are made in Morocco. All of that is going to be produced in Morocco increasingly with renewable energy, so it's going to be green. So whereas factories are shutting down, fertilizer factories shut down in Europe because they don't have energy, also manufacturing, either they're going to get the energy from Morocco through mostly like through green ammonia, get renewable energy the way we get natural gas or crude oil, or they're going to get the finished products. They're going to be made with renewable energy and then sold to Europe. So this is a very, very exciting period, very critical for the trans-Mediterranean, integration, on both sides of the Mediterranean, on the Western Atlantic side here, and an opportunity to sort of reset the table for a more win-win relationship between North Africa, particularly Morocco, and Europe. And then beyond that, Morocco is helping West Africa to follow this example, and so to develop more and have relations that are based on mutual benefit and dignity, economic relations with Europe and elsewhere based on economic dignity.
Okay. In what ways can countries in the Atlantic Basin collaborate on renewable energy projects, such as solar and wind energy, to create new energy corridors? You've mentioned the Morocco gas pipeline. Do we have other examples?
So the key one is green ammonia itself. So green ammonia is a way to take renewable energy and put it on a ship and sell it and send it to somewhere else, because then they can use it as a fuel or reconvert it back into electric current. So Rotterdam has built a huge receiving terminal, the Maasvlakte terminal. They're helping Hamburg build one. That port in Rotterdam has signed an agreement with Morocco. And in fact, they're also signed agreements with Namibia. So what we see, and in between Namibia and Morocco, you also have Mauritania. So Morocco could become the transportation hub for an African Atlantic pipeline of renewable energy, figuratively speaking. It's all transported on ships. So this is quite an important development that could transform the Atlantic coast of Africa. So if we're talking about the wider Atlantic, the African side of the basin is very important. And then, of course, green ammonia is essential for green fertilizer. Ammonia is usually made out of natural gas. OCP is going totally carbon neutral by 2040. They're going to replace all their natural gas-derived ammonia with green ammonia by 2030. So that renewable energy will come, and that will enable farmers to grow. As you know, OCP is working, OCP Africa is working, doing tremendous work in West Africa, boosting crops, providing fertilizer. But it also crosses the Atlantic. Brazil, one of the world's foremost food producers on which global supplies depend, would not be in that position without fertilizer from Morocco. As you know, Morocco is the fourth largest exporter of fertilizer. But now that is, when you think of that fertilizer, you need to think of renewable energy. That's where the renewable energy is coming. And then your food is green. That's produced with it. That's all around the world. And then Morocco, as you know, is a leader in desalination. The biggest desalination plant in Africa is being built in Casablanca, powered by renewable energy. So then the water that's used to produce all of these agricultural products, today, if you're today having a salad in the UK and you have a tomato, it was grown in Morocco, most likely. So, but that will be renewable energy. You'll be eating it through the water, through the fertilizer. And then the same across with the key agricultural producers in Latin America. So what we're seeing is the basis for a new kind of green economic cooperation in the Atlantic Basin, in the wider Atlantic. And this is where we need other actors, like particularly the United States, to really grab the bull by the horns and start doing investments and joint ventures and to join this effort that really could transform the Atlantic Basin.
You have mentioned two important interesting projects, which is ammonia, or examples, ammonia and desalination projects. And we can see the nexus between renewable energies and at the same time enhancing livelihoods and supporting food security status in different regions through the fertilizer industry. And those examples for me, they are very important to mention these nexus. The desalination projects, for example, in Morocco are going to be powered by renewable energy, so that we can reduce the cost of these projects, and it has also financial implications for the implementation of these projects, since desalination projects are cost energy. They demand a lot of energy to be implemented and to be powered. So the nexus between food, energy, nexus is very important to mention through those kind of projects. And we see also the impacts on the livelihoods of people. So I want to ask you about how can the energy transition in the Atlantic Basin be managed to ensure the social equity, and particularly for marginalized communities, including women, indigenous population, and rural areas, and who may face the highest cost, social and economic cost of the shift away from fossil fuels?
You mentioned a lot of key populations that are in distress. Now, one of the important aspects of this is these new green industries, which are also manufacturing. So, for example, Morocco's EV batteries they're making, because now the EV batteries are made out of phosphates. Those would be produced with renewable energy. All these create jobs. So the first way to get people out of poverty is jobs. But beyond this, as you know, Al-Mutmir here in Morocco does a lot of outreach with women and encouraging women's entrepreneurship. And this is connected to agriculture and, again, green energy and fertilizer and green ammonia. This can all be replicated across West Africa. But one of the most important things is these new projects, these green ammonia plants. So there's the Total Eren is building a $20 billion plant in the south, which is both wind and solar. Dutch are building, OCP is building its own $7 billion plant. what is key about these is that the production is directly connected to an offtake market. It's dedicated to an offtake market. Now, this might sound abstract, but this sort of gives the ability to diffuse benefits. Because when you just create renewable energy and you just kind of put it out there in a network, in a transmission system, it's unclear where it's going to go and how the revenue is going to be returned. But when you do it this way, what you're able to do then is to diffuse social benefits. So what we're seeing now in new models, you create a green ammonia plant, for example. Now, to make green ammonia, you also have to desalinate water as part of it. So this is part of making the green hydrogen to make the green ammonia. So you have solar, wind, powering small desalination as part of that. So what we have seen is, because of these models, the companies that are building these are able to then say, okay, a certain amount of the power that's going to be produced will be sold at very competitive market prices, affordable prices for local communities. And similarly, desalinated water could be made available at affordable market prices for local communities, because there's in many parts of the world there's a struggle between having sufficient water for agriculture, which would raise revenues and also create food security, but then having enough water for human consumption. So this helps solve the problem, and it gets the water and it gets the electricity to the communities that actually need it. So particularly isolated rural communities, many of these facilities are, because they need a lot of land or in more remote places. So we've seen it's already a working model to get water and electricity to the people who need it, to help them have a basis to improve their lives.
Thank you very much for stressing out all these projects, important projects in the Atlantic Basin, shaping the energy landscape in the region that are also connected to the global north, including the integration with Europe and securing and diversifying the energy resources of the European countries. You mentioned the example of the UK and, of course, the European Union, who would also benefit from this economic integration that is going to be put in place in the Atlantic Basin through different energy and projects, and also water projects that benefit not only African countries but also the neighbors of these countries in the north. Thank you very much for this valuable insight. It was a pleasure having you today, this special broadcast. Thank you very much. Dear audience, thank you very much for following us today, and stay tuned for more episodes organized on the sidelines of the Atlantic Dialogues. Thank you so much.